You okay? Am I on? Kelly, sound? Am I on? We'll try again. Yep, there we are. Thanks for joining us online. We really appreciate it. We kind of do a both and with this Bible study. We have people in person and we have people online, and we are so excited about having people in person and online. So it's a both and, it's a hybrid. If you are joining us online, I just want you to know that we'd love for you to comment in the comment section. I'm monitoring Facebook. Kelly Quinn, our very apt, tech-savvy person, monitors YouTube and relays those comments down. What you see is just a few seconds after it happens, so we're fine with delaying in here to make sure you get a chance to comment. There will be some opportunities for you to comment. So as we go through. And I'm going to wait a minute to start. Everybody doing all right? Let me know. Is everybody okay? Give a thumbs up or a hand clap. If you're not doing okay, say no, and then we'll see how we can pray for you and help you with that. Are you doing okay? I am not convinced we would not have got a hand clap if you were online.
We do need to continue to pray for our friend Mark Nally.
Yeah.
He went back into the hospital with breathing issues and mechanically drained his lungs today.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Wayne was mentioning that he was. We are continuing our study on these Wednesdays of the 3 not so simple rules. We'll talk about that in just a minute. I'm just giving it just another minute. And then we will get started with some prayer. Are you all enjoying this?
Yes.
Hundreds of people in here online. I hope you all are enjoying this Bible study. And if you're a driving distance or if you can get here, you're welcome to come to the sanctuary. We are able actually to space out in the sanctuary, keep distance. But online, we love having people online too. So let's start with prayer. God, there's a wonderful prayer in the back of the little book. And if you still need one, we'll order some more and get it to you. In the back of the book, there's this guide for daily prayer. And there's a prayer for the beginning of the day. There is a prayer for midday. And then a prayer at the end of the day. Well, we're not quite at the end of the day. So I'm going to let you do that later tonight. So we're going to do the prayer for midday. And just for reference, in the book, you might want to write this down, page 71, but in the back there's these wonderful opportunities on prayer and silence and reflection. So, God of love, holiness, and strength, we thank you for the gift of your presence through the morning and afternoon hours. Continue to make yourself and your way known to us throughout the remaining hours of the day. Grant us grace to follow you in faithfulness, joy, and peace. We are yours. Amen. All right. Oh, this is a study on the 3 not so simple rules. And those 3 rules are, let's all say them together. And if you are at home, you're in the car. If you're in the car, you can probably sing along with the radio, or you might talk back like my wife does to the radio. So it's okay. If you're at the house, go ahead and say it. I know that some of you will be yelling and cheering and talking to the Atlanta Braves and the Houston Astros later this evening. So our 3 simple rules are...
Do no harm.
Let's try it again. Do no harm. Do good. Stay in love with God. And just as a reminder, or it might be new if you haven't been with us these past few weeks, these 3 simple rules, they were really the general rules that John Wesley was the founder of the Methodist movement in the 18th century. It started in England. It did make its way to America with some others. And John Wesley was here, and he went back to England, but the Methodist movement remained in America at the time, prior to 1776, with the colonization. And as the movement was growing, people would gather in groups, just like we're gathering. And there would be small class groups, and there would be like bigger groups, like the societies, and bigger groups. So as time went on, they developed these rules, and it really came down to 3. And then he gave a lot of examples, and they were to do that. He said, here's the 3 things that really we're going to focus on these. We do these, we're good. And you had to follow these, or you could have been expelled from one of the societies or class meeting. Do no harm. And we talked about some of those examples. One was don't get drunk. Don't abuse, especially a spouse. So we had those. Do good, and it had a lot to do with taking care of orphans and widows and the poor and the disadvantaged. So it's do no harm, do good. Now, he didn't actually say stay in love with God. His phrase was attend to the ordinances of God. Prayer, worship, study, taking communion on a regular basis. The author of the book, the little book, The 3 Simple Rules, A Wesleyan Way of Living, Reuben P. Joe, he rephrased it as in stay in love with God, that those are ways through worship and prayer and study, communion, fellowship, serving. Those are ways that we stay connected and in that wonderful relationship with God. So these were that. And do no harm, really it happens in 2 ways, by the things we do and the things that we don't do. Stopping harm from happening, those sins, what we call sins of omission. Do good, it can happen in so many ways, through service, through being together, through giving of our time and our talents and our treasures. And then we started staying in love with God on Sunday. So there are sermons that go along with this. And they should be forever on Facebook and YouTube. We record them. We do the service online. So if you missed one, you want to see it. Or if you thought, did Pastor Jeff really say that? Go back and look and see if I really said it. Then send me an email and I'll be happy to clarify anything. But stay in love with God. We're going to do part 2 and finish this series up this coming Sunday. So I want us to talk a little bit more about do good this week. So let's just jump right in. Remember how we talked about the Good Samaritan? So a couple weeks ago we talked about the story that Jesus tells, which is called the Good Samaritan. You can find it. It's in the Gospel of Luke or John. I believe it's Luke. So there's 4 Gospels. It's Luke chapter 10. So Matthew, Mark, Luke. So we talked about some things that for the Good Samaritan to do good, some of the things that in the story that a person had to put aside. So let's look at Philippians 2:4. Just that one little verse, Philippians 2:4. And tonight, I'm reading from what's known as the New Living Translation. So yours might read just a little different, but I think we'll all get the point together. Don't look out only for your own interest, but take an interest in others too. Pretty straightforward, right? Pretty straightforward. I think it talks about how we might have to put some things aside of our own, just like in the story of the Good Samaritan, in order to do good. But I also want us to look at another part of it. What does it say about looking out for someone's interest? The interest of others, and, because I think there's a both and there.
Not only for your own, but also.
Right, okay, so you are allowed to look out for your own interest. You don't have to put aside all your own interest. You are allowed to look out for your own interest, but not just your own interest. That's the part of doing good. So remember, and some of you, and if you're new to this, you may not know this as much, those that are more veterans with some of this stuff in the Bible might connect this. A person comes to Jesus and says, now Jesus, what are the two, what are the greatest commands? Jesus says, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then love your neighbor as yourself. So I'm going to just write as self. And I think I want us to hear it's as self, and it's not instead of self. Philippians 2:4, the interest of others, which is vitally important, but not only for our own, but we are allowed to look out for our own interests. What kind of things invite everybody to participate, make some comments? We'll spend some time on this. What kind of things happen when we just put others' interests completely ahead of our own? We don't look out for our own interests at all. Or we love our neighbor or love others instead of ourselves. Not as ourselves, and we never really care about our own interests. Has anybody witnessed that happening? Can think of something that might happen? You can get frustrated and angry at life. Say a little bit more.
Well, because you're always doing it for others, and eventually you get tired of it, and you get, I don't know, it's either that or you become a martyr, you think.
Okay, well, perhaps both. So you're so busy doing things for other people that it just wears you out.
Right.
Okay, are you going to be in church Sunday? Okay, we kind of addressed that, I hope, in the sermon.
Oh, okay, good.
I hope I do. I'm hoping to. Okay, so, you can get frustrated and angry because you're worn out. And then there's another thing. You get that martyr complex. Do y'all understand what martyr means? Yeah. Those online, please tell us about what you've seen or maybe you've experienced. Frustrated and angry because you're always doing for others. You get the martyr thing, and you're just become empty. And then I have seen this happen because you're so empty and you get frustrated, you get tired, you turn to unhealthy behaviors. Inappropriate ways of doing things for yourself. So, I'll just put unhealthy. Has anybody seen that happen? Okay. And I want to make sure I pause and let those of you online have an opportunity if you want to chime in. Your health can decline. Not taking care of yourself, so you get unhealthy activities and behaviors, but your own health declines. And I've certainly seen this. The martyr thing, it happens a lot in the context of the Christian community and faith. We almost feel like we're supposed to be martyrs that way. So now that we've acknowledged the problem, I always think it's good if we have a solution. So what are some of the ways, what are some of the ways of how you exercise in a healthy, appropriate way? Marvelous. Thank you for joining us. Some ways, so we're talking about the 3 not so simple rules, talking about do good, how Philippians 2:4, look out, don't look out only for your own interest, but also the interest of others too. So you get to look out for your own interest, but the interest of others. That second command, love neighbor as yourself. It's not just instead of self. And when we put everybody else ahead of us, we can become frustrated, angry, we get that martyr complex, we become empty. Our health declines, we turn to unhealthy behaviors. So what have you learned to do in your life? What are some things that you practice and exercise and do in your life? So you're doing this. You're looking out for others' interests, but it's also your own. And you are loving your neighbor as yourself, not just instead of yourself. So we don't turn to this. Yeah, no, that's fine. If you want to wait, that's fine. Or
set aside some time for yourself. You know, you put everybody else's schedule, and especially as a parent, you do that. Or, you know, even later, schedule all of your meetings, schedule a time for yourself.
okay, so schedule some time for yourself. Some people actually have to put it on their calendar. Schedule some time for yourself.
Don't overcommit.
Don't overcommit.
Learn to say no.
Did I hear you say that? No, I mean, that's what I
Yes,
heard,
sir.
right? Yeah, okay. Don't overcommit. That's a good one. Learning to say no. I heard the other day some great words of wisdom on Friday when I was at a gathering. And it was actually, we're in the United Methodist Church, we have bishops. It was the bishop. And he said the hardest thing to do is to say no to a good idea. I thought, well, now I got to write that down and put that on my mirror so I see it every day. The hardest thing to do is to say no to a good idea. So, yes, don't learn to say no. Don't overcommit. find some time for yourself. How about boundaries?
Hello.
Or knocking it all over? And I'm gonna, we're a few seconds behind, so now I get to watch it go. There it goes. Okay. We're gonna try this again. I guess it didn't like me writing down boundaries.
It's too low on the border.
Yep. So I wrote down boundaries. Kelly, can you throw up a slide that just says boundaries? What's that?
The thing actually broke.
No. It's still all together. It's still together. It didn't break. It just decided to fall over. So we'll just go with this. We'll just do more talking. But boundaries. Exercising boundaries. There's. You don't always have to reply to a text when you get it. Do you?
Well, I know, is that an etiquette thing?
If I get a text at 10 o'clock at night
Oh, no.
about, it's not that this has happened, so I've got to try to think of something that hasn't happened. I won't even do it at 10 o'clock at night. I get a text Sunday at 7 p.m., let's say, which is kind of downtime. And let's say it's October, like it is, and someone sends me a text, this hasn't happened, okay, this hasn't happened, and they say, can you tell me the meaning of Ash Wednesday?
Oh.
I don't need to reply to that right then.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll get with you later, or maybe I just don't, and I'll reply later. So no, I think that there's times when you can't reply to a text. You might be in a meeting, you're teaching.
Driving.
Sometimes you get text, you need a minute to even think about, or wait a while to even respond to it.
Oh, true.
Right. Or driving. Don't text and drive. It's a PSA. It's a pastor service announcement or a pastoral safety announcement. There. Don't text and drive. Okay. Right. So you don't always. You can have these boundaries. One thing that I want to put in my email thing. So this, because you always think, well, I gotta reply, is one that I saw from, his name is Jeff Roper. He works for the Central Texas Conference, leadership stuff. And in his email, when he sends out, it says, my work schedule may be different from yours. In other words, so reply during your work schedule. Just because I'm sending it now doesn't mean. So I thought that was a great way to do that, to allow people to have that boundary.
Then we need to insert the word immediately. It's not necessary to immediately respond.
Right, and that, you don't have to immediately reply. So our work schedule is a little different. Okay? Don't text and drive. Okay. But boundaries are a way, and because doing good for others and being and sacrificing ourselves or doing good sacrificially is not the same as unhealthy. I forget how he put it. I'm going to look and see it. I wrote down the page number, but it kind of fell over. Doing good. Oh yeah. So healthy self-denial. Those were the words that he used, and it's there on page 45. And then we see Jesus, and obviously that would be a healthy self-denial, because Jesus still took time to go away and pray in the midst of doing good, right? So, okay. All right, so just with that, we do good. Now, let's talk about another thing I think that perhaps is a challenge to us doing good is, well, maybe we don't think there's any good we can do, or our little bit isn't going to make any difference at all. Is this ringing true at all? Not sure that there is any good we can do, or I'm not going to be able to make a difference. I don't have the resources to do it. Anybody?
Yes, sir.
Yes? Okay. And a couple people online. So let's look at a story. It's in the Gospel of Matthew, very first book in the New Testament. So Matthew, first Gospel, Matthew, and it's chapter 14. And we're going to start at verse 13, go to verse 21. I think this will be a familiar story to some of you. And I really want us to hear verse 13. Because it's a good transition into the story from what we're talking about. So, is everyone there to follow along? If not, we've got, it's Matthew 14, 13 to 21. Matthew 14, 13 to 21. As soon as Jesus heard the news, and the news that he heard was about the death of his cousin, John the Baptist. And the guy eats locusts and honey and wears these weird, but unfortunately, and that was his cousin. So he hears the news about the death. As soon as Jesus heard the news, he left in a boat to a remote area to be alone. It sounds to me like Jesus has a healthy boundary. Taking care of himself, he has this time that he needs to grieve. I want to go be alone. I've been teaching, I've been doing all this. He just got rejected in his own hometown. He gets the news of the death of his cousin. Okay? And then I love the next phrase. But the crowds heard where he was headed and followed him on foot from many towns. Well, welcome to life. 14, Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. So he tried to get away alone. He had a little bit of time, at least in the boat, but he has compassion. He does it. But I still think there's this, some healthy self-denial, healthy self-denial. So that evening, verse 15, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy food for themselves." So it's getting late, close to dinner. Go let them eat, send them off. And Jesus said, "That isn't necessary. You're so worried about them, you feed them." And of course they say, "But we only have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish." And then in John's Gospel, the loaves and the fish, they come from a young boy, his lunch. Okay, so in here, let's look at the reality. There's crowds of people. I mean, just tons of people. It's close to dinner time. They don't have any food. Jesus says, "We'll feed them." Well, we can't because we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish. So the reality is, we can't do anything good right now. The only way is for them to go take care of it themselves. We don't have the capacity to do good. Now, have ever had that thought or that experience in your own life? I just don't have the capacity to do it. I'm looking at the reality. Here it is. I can't do it. But thankfully for us, something wonderful happens. The disciples are skeptical. In verse 17, but we only have 5 loaves, so they get skeptical about it. Jesus says, bring them here. Verse 18, then he told the people to sit down on the grass. Jesus took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, looked up toward heaven, blessed them. Then he broke the loaves into pieces, and he gave the bread to the disciples, who took it and fed the people. It says in verse 20, they all ate as much as they wanted. There's some kind of miraculous good happening here, right? I mean, there's this miraculous good happening here. And here's the part I love. The disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftovers. How many close disciples did Jesus have? 12, right? They become called apostles, but 12. They have to go feed everybody. Now you know what they have to do? They have to go pick up all the leftovers. Jesus doesn't say, just push it aside for the birds and the squirrels. He makes the disciples go pick up these leftovers. They each get a basket full. What do you think that's about? What's that?
Them being able to feed themselves.
Well, they being able to feed themselves. Yes, excellent. What other thoughts do y'all have about what that might be about? Why that's inserted rather than they took the bread, everybody ate as much as they want, and over 5,000 people were fed. And this little thing about picking up the leftovers, it gets inserted in each time that this story is told.
Jesus is trying to make some point that we should have faith, that there's always something we can do.
Okay? Have faith. There's always something we can do.
Maybe more than you need.
And there's going to be more than you even think. More than you need. And I think, this is just me, those are great. I just want to dovetail on that. I agree with all those. That's great insight that they have to go pick it up. I mean, can you just imagine picking it up and then, wow, we were so skeptical, and now look at this, and we got this whole thing of leftovers that we have to go pick up as a real tangible lesson. That when Jesus is in it, we're going to be able to do more than we even think we can. So it's one thing to do good, to do no harm and do good. I think it goes to a whole different level when Jesus is also involved in that. The good that we're going to be able to do is going to be exponential. Now, name me 2 of the disciples out of the 12, just 2 names. Can anybody think of a couple of them? Matthew. The disciples. Matthew was one. Yeah. Who? Peter. Simon, the other Simon. Yeah. No, it's okay. Thaddeus. Bartholomew. Thomas. So, 2 named Judas, 2 named James. So let's go with Matthew and Peter. There's a crowd of well over 5,000, because in this account it says, well, there was 5,000 men, plus women and children. So, I mean, yeah, we're talking at least 10,000. So if Matthew is going over here and Peter's going over here, they're probably not seeing how much each other's picking up. And they're not even able to see all the good that was done with just this little bit. Sometimes we don't see all the good. We don't see the results immediately. I mean, we might see some of it, but we don't see the total impact, the comprehensiveness of the good from a small action of a little boy with just his lunch. Because that's how it all started. And it started by this little boy doing something good. He had to give his lunch, share his lunch. So this small action of this little boy, and look what happens. And it helps me in my efforts of doing good to remember that, that little bit that I can offer and do when the Holy Spirit and God and Jesus get involved, it can really have an impact. And I might not see it. I may not see it. And that's where that faith part comes in. And another thought that I had was, I think sometimes in doing good, we may think we're just dealing with leftovers. You smiled and laughed, so
That's true.
so what do you hear when that is said? How did you take it?
We feel like that what we're doing is not really important.
Yeah, what we're doing.
In the scheme of things.
Right, in the big scheme of things, not really important. Somebody's doing it bigger and better than we are, so what's the point, right? Well, the starfish story. The starfish story is a wonderful story. Google the story of the little girl with the starfish if you haven't heard it. Yes. But sometimes we think, we're here at Belton. We are what one would call a medium-sized church within the context of United Methodism. When you look at a lot of the independent, non-denominational, which really there is usually a denominational affiliation, there's the mega churches, then there's the large church. We would be considered a medium size. We may think we can't do that. Look, they're bigger, they're better, they can do that, so what's the point of us doing that? Well, there is, because look at what Jesus was able to do with just one little boy's lunch. Even a small church. This is a great story, even for a small church. It was just a little boy's lunch, and look at what can happen with the doing good. And I think that's where the faith comes in, and the activity of the Holy Spirit come in, and I think that's part of what helps make us distinct, not necessarily different or opposite, from civic organizations that do good. And there's nothing wrong with civic organizations, and they do a lot of good. Rotary Club does good. Lions Club does good. Masonic Lodge does good. And civic organizations came into being to do good. But I think that this sets us that we got to remember the church is not just another civic organization. Can we partner with them to do good? Can they partner with us to do good? Well, of course. But I think the faith element and Jesus getting involved in it makes it distinct for the church. What do y'all think? You have you're thinking, you have a question or a comment?
A lot of people in the organizations are also Christians that push their organizations to do what they're doing.
That's very true. Very true. organizations have some roots back in people of faith that help get those started. That's right. And what's nice about the civic organizations is people of different faiths come in, or people with no faith come in and able to do good. Okay. All right, so let me just pause and see if there's comments or questions about any of our 3 not so simple rules at this point, about something tonight, do good, about the do no harm. We'll talk more about the stay in love with God last week. Tonight is an overlap because of things about boundaries and Jesus taking time. That spills over into stay in love with God. But let me just pause and see if there's comments or questions. And online, please let me know. It will come right up on the phone. Kelly, are we putting together another blooper reel?
We can,
Okay, well, this falling over, that should get in the blooper reel.
of course.
At least I didn't say anything bad. All right. Questions or comments? In the book, the 3 simple rules, in page 48, the last paragraph, and in case you don't have the book, I want to read this, and think about it, and we'll comment on this for a moment. While these first 2 rules are essential, and the first 2 rules are do no harm, do good. The truth is, we cannot fix on our own much of what ails us. And this is towards the end of the chapter on do good, so it's going to transition and then into the stay in love with God. Well, these first 2 rules are essential. The truth is, we cannot fix on our own much of what ails us. Legislation or committees will not solve our divisiveness, our woundedness, or our brokenness. The clarity we seek on a multitude of issues and the faithfulness and fruitfulness we long for cannot be manufactured on our own. Only living in the healing, loving, redeeming, forming, and guiding light and presence of God will bring the redemption, healing, transformation, and guidance that is so desperately needed. So the clarity we seek on a multitude of issues and the faithfulness and fruitfulness we long for cannot be manufactured on our own. Only living in the healing, loving, redeeming, forming, and guiding light and presence of God will bring the redemption, healing, transformation, and guidance that is so desperately needed. The book was copyrighted in 2007. Because he starts out in the preface, we search for a way to overcome the divisiveness that separates, disparages, disrespects, diminishes, and leaves us wounded and incomplete. I had to go and look again to make sure he didn't write it in 2019 or So, and what he's getting at with the stay in love is God is critical, because without that, these other two they just don't have the impact that they should. They're not going to be able to transform.
It's the why.
It is the why. It is the why. Yes. And I think I think I'm supposed to say this Sunday. We'll see if I do. If we just do the two, do no harm, do good, that will change us a little bit. It can change the church a little bit. It can change the community a little bit. But the stay in love with God makes it to where it can transform us rather than just change us a little bit. But the divisiveness that we experience in the community, in the country, in the world, that has also found its way into the church, that can be healed and transformed and reconciled if we pay attention to these three simple rules. And all three. The divisiveness that we have over an issue within the United Methodist Church, the denomination, we can go forward in a way. We may still divide, but we can go forward in a way following these three simple rules where there is no more harm that is done, and that people think, okay, this is a good thing because, and everybody's interested in saying, well, not God, so a grace, and by doing good, a graceful way of separating without a lot of animosity and arguing and lawsuits. So from my perspective, the information and the proposals that will come to General Conference whenever that happens, whenever it does, some of them have been born with these three simple rules guiding them, and guiding that, and hopefully within the process that will continue. Okay, let's just stop there for questions or comments. Well, I hope as we go forward into the rest of 2021 and we look going into 2022, and I'm speaking contextually here now. If you're not part of the Belton First Time Methodist Church, we are so happy that you are joining this Bible study. Right now, forgive me because I'm going to speak to the community at Belton First Time Methodist Church as we go forward, that these three things would really be our core values as we go forward. That we all commit. Because I think, tell me if I'm wrong, I think no matter where you are, what your political affiliation is, that even though we disagree, and we have a diverse congregation politically, it's diverse, not divided, but diverse, I think we can all agree that we should do no harm, do good, and stay in love with God. I think wherever you are on certain issues, especially those that the United Methodist Church is facing, whether you are an ultimate traditionalist or an extreme progressive or somewhere in between, and there's a lot of in between, I still think we can agree to do no harm, do good, and stay in love with God. I think even if we do divide and we have an expression of Methodism over here and one over here and one over here, that we still come together to do no harm, do good, and stay in love with God. I think that these are three critical core values for the church at this time, in our culture, in our community. So, okay. So, has anybody, we're going to shift a little bit into the transition to staying in love with God. Within the last 18 months, and I use that because that's how long we've been really living with the pandemic, and it's changed life quite a bit for us. In the church, outside the church, I think. Has anybody discovered a new spiritual practice or renewed spiritual practice? You know, some kind of spiritual discipline or religious activity? And if you have, would love to hear.
A prayer journal.
A prayer journal.
I did it for a while and then I dropped it. Too busy, I thought.
Okay.
And came back to that.
Okay. Prayer journal, got too busy, or you thought so, and then you were able to come back to that. Great, thank you. A prayer journal. Anyone else? Well, I think for myself, it was kind of forced. I mean, not really, but solitude is actually a spiritual discipline. Rediscovered the blessing of that, and just having some uninterrupted time to focus and be with God. So some real good one-on-one time with God. And solitude it's not for everybody, and for me, not a long time, but was able to do that during that time. So I hope that you will think of some spiritual practices to help you stay in love with God. Okay. We have choir that starts at 7 o'clock, and I know that that's not what we call an evergreen statement. If you're watching this Thursday or Monday at 2 o'clock, you're going, but it's why we keep this a little under an hour. I honor the time, so let me just put it this way. We have another event coming up in just a few minutes. But I hope that you, if you are joining us online, that you'll join us on Sunday. We have this service, it's 10:45, traditional service, 10:45 a.m. on Sundays. We do put it out on Facebook, on YouTube. It is recorded. You can watch it some other time. Would love to have you participate in that or be here in person. It is a nice traditional service that we do, and would love to have you to join us. So let's close with a prayer. God, for your love, mercy, grace, forgiveness, for your power, miraculous power, that is at work in the good that we do, even the small little bits, we give you thanks and praise. And now, God, send us forth with the power to live as your people. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. All right. Thank you all so much. Next week, we'll continue with Stay in Love with God, and then we'll shift with something different for the 2 weeks after that, leading up to the time of Thanksgiving. Marvelous.